All right, well, good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for being here. It seems Walter and I were talking, this is a hot topic, and we're really glad that you guys are here. We are still waiting for another class to come. They'll get here when they get here, so I'm going to start with introductions. My name is Cheng. I'm with Skyline College Health and Wellness Services. I'm one of the personal counselors, and just want to say thank you really for being here. Oh, and Cassie's waving to the class. Oh, here they come. Here they come, so they'll make their way in. Just a few quick things. Really want to thank the Learning Commons for opening up this space for us to get educated, for us to learn a little bit more, to get equipped with the right information so we know how to really thoughtfully address this current event. And I also want to give a shout out to Cassidy Wilkins, who this was actually her idea, one of the students here. So I just want to let students know that you guys have the power to make change on this campus. She thought of this idea. We talked to Walter, we talked to Gabriella, and we got this thing going pretty quickly because it's a pertinent and relevant need. There's a sign-in sheet that's going around, so if you could kindly pass that around and just sign in so we know sort of numbers. And I realize I have some evals that are going to go around. I'm going to need to print more. And we also have for the students participation slips. If any of your professors are offering extra credit for you attending this, please do come to see me before you leave and get a participation slip from me. Let me see. I think that's more or less it. Thank you for being here, just ready to learn. Walter's going to give a short talk about some of the facts around the coronavirus, and then we're going to open up to questions and answers. And there are no. You can ask him anything, and he'll. I'm putting you on the spot here, but yes, you can ask him anything you'd like.
I'll do my best.
Absolutely. Okay. So with that, can we give a quiet round of applause for Walter?
Oh, thanks, Perry. So just to introduce myself real quickly, I'm Walter Cheng, and I'm a physician, an internal medicine doc, and I'm also the medical director here at the health center. And my background not only is in medicine, but I also have a master's degree in infectious disease epidemiology and was studying infectious outbreaks for a long time. So obviously this outbreak is of great interest to me, and clearly from the people here, a great interest to you guys. So I wanted to talk today a little bit about what is going on with this outbreak, what it represents, where we think we'll go from here, and just some overall strategies on how to protect yourselves from this should this become more of an issue in the United States and here in California. So, wow, this is a huge turnout. Coronavirus. I just want to go over a little bit about what coronavirus is and what this particular coronavirus is doing. And so the term coronavirus is a bit of a wastebasket term. It's a group of viruses that can cause disease, and there are many types of coronaviruses out there that have been circulating for hundreds and hundreds of years. They can infect both humans and animals. And typical coronaviruses cause the common cold. And so the common cold is caused by a whole host of viruses, of which coronaviruses usually cause about 10% of common colds. And the vast majority of coronaviruses cause mild cold symptoms. So when you get a runny nose, a cough, low-grade fever, coronavirus is oftentimes one of the things that causes it. The one issue about coronaviruses is that some variants of coronavirus can be more can cause more serious disease. And there are two previous epidemics of coronaviruses that caused quite significant human disease. One was called SARS. Have you guys heard of that before? Yeah, great. So SARS emerged in the early 2000s, I think it was 2003, 2004, and emerged in China and actually spread throughout a good chunk of Asia. And whereas the common cold kills very few people, SARS ended up killing about 10% of people who got the disease. But fortunately, they were able to control that epidemic pretty quickly. About 8,000 people were infected, about 800 died. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, another coronavirus emerged called MERS. Had anyone heard of that? And that stood for so SARS stood for, oh gosh, I forgot, it's like systemic acute respiratory syndrome or severe acute respiratory syndrome, I forget now. And then MERS stood for Middle East Respiratory Syndrome. And this is again emerged out of the Middle East. And that one actually had a very high mortality rate. About 30 to 40% of people who got the virus actually died. But fortunately for both SARS and MERS, even though they killed a lot of people, they were hard to transmit. Now, this coronavirus emerged probably sometime in late December in the city of Wuhan, China, which is in a province called Hubei province. It's sort of in the center of the country. And no one knows exactly how this emerged, but we do know that coronaviruses exist in both animals and humans. And there is some discussion that this virus probably emerged from a live animal market that existed in Wuhan. That's the leading theory of how it emerged. And so probably there was some animal coronavirus that had mutated into a form that could be transmitted into a human. Obviously there's been a lot of question as to how the Chinese government has responded or initially responded to the epidemic, that whether or not they try to suppress information about this. Nevertheless, there was widespread communication of this virus in that Wuhan, Hubei province area. And obviously by the time we got to about the third or fourth week of January, China had put in a lot of lockdown procedures to try to contain the virus, and then other governments around the world were also putting in travel restrictions to try to limit the number of people from that area coming into the respective countries. And so the United States now has actually put a travel ban on China. And so I think it was as of February 2nd, no one is allowed to come in from China to the United States who is not a U.S. citizen. Or if you're, let me backtrack. So if you're not a U.S. citizen, you cannot come from China to the United States at the moment unless you're directly related to a U.S. citizen. So if you're married to a U.S. citizen or you're the child of a U.S. citizen, otherwise you're not permitted to enter from China. If you are a U.S. citizen coming in from China as of February 2nd, if it's from the greater country of China, you are asked to do a 14-day home quarantine. And if you're coming from Hubei province, you're actually going to be forcibly quarantined in a detention center for 14 days. So that's where we are with the United States. So obviously, the hope had been that with these containment measures in place, that the virus would be limited to Hubei province and to China in general. Unfortunately, as some of you have seen with the information, with the news, that it appears that initially there were some isolated cases in other countries, but it appears that there have now been systemic, more widespread communication in other countries. And so where we're seeing a lot of hotbed activity right now is in South Korea, particularly in the southern part of the country. There appears to be one woman who probably got infected with a contact from someone in China who unfortunately went to a large church service. I think there were like 2,000 people at the church service, and went twice. And despite being symptomatic and told to be tested, she actually delayed getting testing. And so now there's an outbreak in South Korea of about 1,700 cases, and that's growing. There was also another outbreak in Japan where there was a cruise ship where there probably was an index case there, and they tried to do a quarantine, but it didn't work, and ultimately 700 people there have been infected, including a number of Americans. And then unfortunately, some of the health workers that were going on that ship also got infected, and they've brought the virus into the actual land of Japan, and there are about 170 cases in Japan. And so Japan actually just instituted additional measures. I think they shut down all of their schools. So they're from primary through high school, the entire country has shut down the school system through the end of March to try to get this under control. And you've also probably read that in Italy, there's been another outbreak as well in northern Italy, in the Lombardy region there. There's a couple hundred cases there. And unfortunately, now we're starting to see some cases of people who've been in that area who've now brought it to other parts of Europe. Lastly, there's an epidemic going on in Iran as well, and that's also now starting to spread throughout the Middle East. And I saw this morning there's like 30 new cases each in like Bahrain and Kuwait and some other cases. Now let's bring us to the United States now. So in the United States, we have currently 60 cases of coronavirus. All of these cases so far had, up until yesterday, had been identified in either people who had traveled from China, who were directly in contact with someone who came from China, so i.e. a spouse or a child of someone who had come from China, so they were living in the same house, or they were airlifted back from that cruise ship in Japan. But I think we've all, have people heard about what happened yesterday at UC Davis? So there appears to be a case of one patient who got ill, who had no travel to China and no contact with anyone from China. And their symptoms were suspicious for this new coronavirus. There was a little bit of delay in testing, but it looks like that person has tested positive. So somehow they must have gotten it from someone in the community. And so it's unclear where they've gotten it. I think what this tells us right now is that probably this virus is here in California and in the United States and will likely spread. I want to kind of go over how this virus looks and how serious this virus really is, and then think about what can we do as a community to protect ourselves and protect the people around us. Okay, there's actually 3 take-home messages I wanted to kind of stress today. And I'm going to say it right now, and I'm going to say it again at the end. Okay, so the 3 things that, if you're going to remember, I'm talking a lot right now. So if there's 3 facts I want you to remember today, all right? The first fact is there's absolutely no reason to panic, okay? This virus does not deserve panic, and panic does not help. The second thing is that if you have not gotten a flu shot yet this year, please get it. Because the problem with coronavirus is it looks just like the flu. And we can't have people get the flu right now because that just confuses the whole picture. Just so you know, the health center here has free flu shots. So we have them available. So I expect a good line after this talk. If you haven't gotten your flu shots yet this year, it's just a little poke, and make sure to get it every year because I suspect this coronavirus will be here for a while. The third thing is the best way to protect yourself is what? Thank you. So I've heard people say put on masks. Masks do very little. We'll talk about masks in a moment. But it's to wash your hands. And I'm actually going to go over how to wash your hands in just a little bit. But you can wash your hands using hand gel. You can wash your hands using soap and water. And we'll go over how to actually do it because most people don't do it correctly. Okay, so the thing about coronavirus is that, one of the things that we're still struggling to figure out is how serious is this disease and, how severe, of a disease is it causing. So right now we have about 80,000 identified cases worldwide. The vast majority are in China. And the interesting thing is the death rates from this virus are kind of a little unclear. And so in China, where we had the most cases, we're seeing a death rate from this virus of about 2 to 3%. However, it's kind of my thought that, you calculate a death rate by the number of people who die divided by the number of people who have the disease, right? So you have a numerator and a denominator. The challenge in China is I don't think anyone really knows what the denominator is. Partly because their health system got so overwhelmed with cases that anyone with mild disease or minimal disease were probably turned away from health centers because they were completely overwhelmed. So I don't think we were capturing every single person who caught this virus. Does that make sense? And I think that's borne out when you look at the death rates in other countries that don't have a severe epidemic. So if you look at South Korea, 1,700 cases is a lot, but it's not going to overwhelm the system in the same way. And South Korea has a better developed healthcare system than China does. And they're seeing death rates well below 1%, typically, And so in a lot of outside of China, we're seeing death rates lower than 1%. Now, how does this compare to the flu? So in the flu, just so you know, every year about 30 million Americans get influenza. And it kills somewhere between 20 to 60,000 Americans. And so the death rate from flu is somewhere between about 1 in 2,000 to 1 in 500 or so. 1 in 1,000 to 1 in 2,000 is the rough rate. I think this coronavirus will be slightly higher than that, but considerably less than SARS and MERS. So is it a serious virus? Yes. Will it kill you? Probably not. We've noticed that over 80% of people who get this disease get very mild disease, just like the common cold like you normally get with other coronaviruses. But there are certain groups that seem to be at higher risk for serious infection. And so those are people who are older. So we've been seeing more serious illnesses in people over the age of 60, people who have compromised immune systems, so people who are on medications that can suppress their immune system, people with uncontrolled HIV disease would probably have more severe disease. And then the other most important thing is people with underlying lung conditions. So if you have asthma or you have emphysema or you have other lung conditions, that would put you at probably some higher risk. Okay, but the take-home message here is that probably about 80% of people have very mild disease. About 15 to 20% of people have more serious disease that might require medical attention, and so on and so forth. Should you seek medical attention? Right. Okay. So if you have mild disease, and that is that you have a runny nose, a cough, a low-grade fever less than, let's say, 101 degrees, and it just feels like a cold, you're probably okay. If you feel like you're developing, this is not just for coronavirus, but for any respiratory virus, if you feel like the cough is getting to a point where you can't catch your breath, that it is difficult for you to walk up a flight of stairs or walk on level ground, or you feel like you're huffing and puffing to breathe, or your fever starts to spike higher, greater than 102 degrees, this is when you really should seek medical attention and get guidance from a physician. So, unfortunately with coronavirus, there is no specific treatment for it, but there are supportive measures that can help people a lot, and early detection is important, okay? I'm talking a lot right now. I'm trying to make sure I have everything I need to say. So I had this whole train of thought, and now I just went blank for a second here. So I think that's probably all I really wanted to say about coronavirus as a virus itself. I think, just to recap some take-home messages, I think it is spreading. I think the CDC had just said a couple of days ago that, it's not a matter of if, but a matter of when this will spread into our community. It will probably come. But the good news is that, generally speaking, the disease is mild. However, it can cause more serious symptoms. So if you start to develop serious symptoms like high fever, cough with shortness of breath, you should seek medical attention. Let me tell you about how to protect yourself. I think that's really important. So I actually just got back from Taiwan 3 days ago because my parents live there and I was visiting them. And what's interesting is everyone's wearing a mask. Like, everyone is. It's crazy, right? Have people seen people wearing masks around here? We're starting to see that a little bit, right? So are masks helpful or not? Okay, so the answer is yes and no. Okay, so there's no clear answer. So let me tell you when a mask could be helpful and when it's not helpful. The thing about masks is that in and of itself, they don't really protect you against coronavirus. And let me tell you how coronavirus is actually spread. So coronaviruses are spread in two ways, either through direct inhalation or breathing in of the virus. That actually doesn't account for a lot of transmission cases because when one sneezes or coughs, those droplets go out in the air and they drop pretty quickly. And so what's interesting is you can actually study different viruses and different bacteria and see what kind of particles they live in. And actually it's interesting when you cough like a Goomba out, you have different types of particles that come out. You have the big wad of spit that just drops. Then you have medium-sized particles that float up in the air for a couple minutes and then drop. And then you have fine particulate droplets that stay up in the air for minutes, okay? And what's interesting is diseases like tuberculosis, they're in the fine droplets that stay way up in the air for a long time. Coronavirus is probably in the big Goomba that comes right out and drops to the floor, or the ones that stay up for a very short amount of time. So the thing about catching it is that you probably have to be directly sneezed on or coughed on to catch it from the air. So if I were to cough right now, here, like this, probably none of you would get it because it wouldn't reach that far and it would probably drop before it would get to you. Okay, so where is coronavirus actually transmitted? It's actually from touching contaminated surfaces. And coronavirus can probably stay alive for at least a number of hours, if not a few days, on contaminated surfaces. So if someone were to cough and then touch this desk and then you touch the desk later, and then you touch your eyes, your nose, your mouth, that's when you would pick up the virus. That's where the vast majority of viruses are picked up. So it gets to the question, are masks helpful? Sure, I think they're helpful if you're in a very crowded environment where you don't know people around you and someone just happens to cough, you know. But that's not that common here, you know. So we're not generally squeezing through incredibly tight spaces. And the other thing that masks sometimes can help people do is it helps them to prevent touching their face, you know? So there's a barrier. But I can't tell you how many times when I was in Taipei this time around, everyone was wearing masks, and I saw a gazillion people, you know, reach in to scratch their nose, or what they do is they take it off to eat, and they've touched the outside of the mask now, and they put the mask back on. Once you've touched that outside of the mask, it's game over, because all that stuff that was here is all in the front of your mask too. It's all there, right? Or I see people take off their mask, put it on the table, and then try to put the mask back on, and I'm like, well, you just contaminated your mask. So, you know, to be honest, technically masks can be useful, but you can't wear it all day. And the minute you've touched the outside of it, it's game over with that mask. You got to get a new mask. And so logistically speaking, when I'm in the hospital working as a doctor, you know, and I'm going from patient to patient, I only use a mask for 2 minutes at a time, and then I throw it away, and I use another mask for someone else. So logistically speaking, if you're going to be wearing a mask all day, it's not going to be helpful. Okay, so the time that masks are useful in the community, in my opinion, is if you have an illness. So if you are coughing or sneezing, you could wear a mask, and that helps obviously to prevent you from coughing out in the open or coughing here where some of your spit will land on the table, you know, and also prevents you from rubbing your nose and your mouth as much. By far and away, the best way to prevent yourself from getting this coronavirus or any other respiratory virus is proper hand hygiene, because almost always we transmit the disease by touching a surface and then bringing it to our face. Does anyone know how many times you touch your face in an hour? Anyone? How many times the average human touches their face in an hour?
18.
Yeah. 4? Okay, yes, 18, 22, yeah, it's about 25 times an hour. Okay, so it's at every 2 minutes. No one's touching their face right now because I've said that, but I saw a bunch of people touching their faces before. So you know, I can tell you not to touch your face. It is very habitual for people, so it's hard. So let me go over actually how you guys should wash your hands, okay? So I'm gonna put this down for a second, or maybe you can hold this. Yeah, I just contaminated the microphone. So I have this little handy gel. How do you gel? So most people do this, right? So I'm gonna stand up actually. So you guys have used hand gel before. I see most people just kind of do this and they're done, right? Is that correct technique? Absolutely not. So you actually don't need a lot of gel. You just need a little pea-sized, I know you can't see it on my hand, but the key is you want to get the insides of your hands, the webbing between your hands. This is actually very common. You have to get your thumbs, because when you rub this, you only get your 4 fingers, and you also want to get the backs of your hands. And the actual gel takes about 15 seconds to evaporate, but you want to make sure you get the thumbs and you get the webbings of your hands. That's actually where a lot of the bacteria and viruses are stored. Thanks. The second thing is, and so you should gel frequently. So every time you realize that, let's say, like, you guys are in class, many of you are students, right? So what I would say is actually proper hand hygiene is to gel in and gel out out of every class. Let's carry one of these bottles. If your hands are visibly soiled, so if you've actually, let's say you're going down the banister and there's clearly someone who like blew out a booger on the banister, and you've touched it, right? So now your hands are visibly soiled. This not as good anymore. You really should wash your hands. And the key thing about washing your hands is that, again, the mistake that people make is they pump the hand soap, and the first thing they do is just start to rinse it off, right? So you actually don't want to do that. So what you need to do is actually fully lather the hands, and that includes getting into that web space, getting the back of the hands all the way down to the wrist. I tell people that lathering should take about 20 seconds. And so you actually want to sing happy birthday at a regular speed, not fast. If you sing the happy birthday song, that's about the time for lathering, and then you rinse off, okay? That's really, really important. I think that data show that with good hand hygiene, you actually reduce your risk of getting viral illnesses by up to 50%. And it's by far and away the most effective way of preventing illness. And especially as a physician, where we encounter sick people all the time, proper hand hygiene is essential. If you think about it, I probably run into people with respiratory illnesses 1,000 times a year. So why am I not getting like 500 colds a year, right? And I'm lucky because I only get maybe one, and it's because of hand hygiene. And so if you guys are getting more than one cold a year, it's probably because your hands aren't as clean as they should be. So just the message out there. Anyway, so I'm trying to keep this lighthearted and fun. So that's pretty much all I have to say about this virus. I think the key thing is, again, it's the bad news. It's probably coming. The the good news is that it's even though it's a serious disease, for the most part, people will be okay, and we have a really good healthcare system, a good public health system to try to help people out. There are a lot of, I think, myths out there about the disease. I'm not going to go into them. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions from the audience about that. I'm happy to answer them. So I'm going to open up to questions now, and thank you for your attention. Oh.
Can we give Walter just a small round of applause? And for the purposes of Q&A, if you could raise your hand, and I'll bring the mic over so we can get that recorded. And I see one hand over here.
Does it matter the water temperature when you're rinsing your hands? And number two, are there any tests that can be taken prior, like right now, to see if you have it and just not showing it symptoms?
Yeah, so those are really good questions. Actually, I'll pull this back up. So did everyone hear the question? So okay. So no, the temperature of the water does not matter when you wash your hands. So cold or hot water is fine. Just clean water. The second question you asked was about whether you can get tested now. The answer is no. And so the testing is only done through the CDC right now. And so it's only currently authorized for people who exhibit symptoms consistent with coronavirus, who have traveled from China, or who have contact with someone who traveled from China who have symptoms. I think those guidelines will change very soon, because obviously we'll now see people coming from South Korea especially, and from Italy, or from Iran. Well, actually there's a travel ban for Iran, so probably not that. But South Korea and Italy, that the CDC might be changing things. But this is not a commercially available test that you can go to your primary care doctor and say, hey, I just want to get tested for this. It's actually not available. Thanks, that's a good question.
I see a question over here.
Is this virus curable?
It is not. So unfortunately, with almost all viruses and respiratory viruses, there is no, actually not only is it not curable, but there actually is no real treatment for it. So the typical course of this illness will be a 7 to 10 day cold-like symptom. And unfortunately, people who have to develop more serious lung problems from it, breathing problems, need to be supported with medicines that help their breathing, but there's actually no direct medicine to treat this virus. They are studying right now several antiviral medicines, but nothing's been approved at the moment right now. There also is a work on the vaccine, but that's going to take some time. Yeah.
So does that mean whoever is contagious with the coronavirus, they die, or like right away? Or?
No. So like most, so it's not curable by medicine, but your immune system will fight the virus. And so like most cold viruses, we don't have cures per se, but your body will fight the virus off, okay? So with this virus, the vast majority of people will have mild illness that will go away.
So you mentioned a while ago that the coronavirus could be transmitted through item contamination. Does that mean that having packages or shipments from China or other countries where coronavirus seems to be rampant could also be a possible way to transmit the virus?
That's a great question. So I think the likelihood of there being a transmission through a package being shipped from Asia is probably very low. So I mentioned earlier that the virus can stay alive for some time on surfaces, but the surfaces have to, have to remain somewhat moist. I'd imagine that most of these are packaged in factories where the material is dry, so it's unlikely in that transit that the virus, if let's say like a worker who packed that package had the illness, it'd be very, very unlikely to imagine that you could get it from that package. You know, obviously there's some more data that we need to collect, but it'd be incredibly unlikely for that to happen. Yeah.
Oh, so if someone gets the virus, and like if it lasts, you say it lasts for 10 days. If someone gets the virus, and after 10 days they go back to normal, like it goes away.
Right. We actually still is your question about like how long can they transmit it for to someone else, or how long will they be sick for?
How long will they be sick for when if they get the virus,
Yeah.
or after they get the virus?
Well, that's still a little. We're still learning a lot about this. Now, typical coronaviruses, you will be sick for about 7 to 10 days. That's a typical course of a cold. Obviously, some people develop more serious illness where they can be sicker longer than that, the people who develop severe illness. We don't know all the information on this virus yet, but I would imagine that the period of illness is about 7 to 10 days. And actually, if I can kind of add this, tails of one thing I didn't answer or didn't talk about is when is it transmissible? And just so you guys know, the thought right now is that the incubation period of this virus is about 2 to 14 days. And unfortunately, it looks like you can transmit the virus before you even get sick. And so you could have the virus, not have any symptoms, but still be transmitting it to other people. And you're probably infectious to other people through the course of your illness, possibly even after you're fully recovered for a little bit of time, which makes the control of this virus challenging. Because asymptomatic people with no symptoms, can potentially transmit the disease.
Oh, last
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
So if you get the virus and if it's been 10 days, what do you do during the 10 days? Like, you just sit at home and you can't do nothing? Or like, can you not go outside?
Yeah.
Pretty
So here's the thing. Most of people will just catch a normal cold. You will not be going to a CDC lab to get this testing for this coronavirus. It's impossible. So here's the thing. How many people have had a cold in the last 12 months? Like, right. So could you imagine if all of us here went to go get this testing? It'd be impossible, right? So what I tell people is that, okay, if I was going to make an educated guess, this is probably going to spread within California. Some of us are probably going to get this, okay? Most of us are going to get a common cold that we cannot distinguish this new coronavirus from any other cold virus we get. So what I tell people is if you're sick, right, wash your hands really well. If you blow your nose, like, throw the tissue away right away and wash your hands. If you're going to cough, don't cough in your hand. Cough in your elbow. Things to help prevent the spread. I also probably recommend that when you're sick with a cold, you shouldn't come to class. Now, I know you got to work that out with your professors and stuff like that. But generally speaking, you know, avoiding contact with other people is always a good thing, no matter what illness you get. Okay, but when you say you can't do anything, it's not that you can't do anything, but I think you just take common sense measures to try not to spread the disease to other people. And it could be this or any other virus, which will all look the same. You know, I'm just telling people that if you think, though, that you're getting symptoms and you might have been exposed to someone who has traveled from China and now I think traveled from South Korea or from northern Italy, that could raise a suspicion that you might want to let your doctor know about that exposure. Because those are the people that I think will be focusing on testing.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you don't have a list of what people can and cannot do when they get this virus? Like, we can't go outside, we can't come to class, but we can do like stay at home, or what can you do?
Yeah, I wish I could give you a real straight answer on this, because I think that if you were to get a cold, I couldn't tell you right now if you got this new coronavirus or something else. What I can tell you to do is there's not that you have to. I assume you didn't travel to one of these countries that we talked about. Is that correct? Okay. So if you didn't, then probably 99% chance that you don't have this coronavirus right now, and you just have a regular cold virus. People who have regular cold virus, I tell them get plenty of rest. There's no reason you can't go outdoors, but you should limit your interactions with other people. So, you shouldn't be sharing your body fluids with other people. So making out with someone is not a good thing, or, coughing or, on someone's not a good thing, But I'm just saying these, in general, what you want to do is just limit your interactions. Now, obviously, because of school commitments, because of work commitments, because of family commitments, we can't all quarantine ourselves when you just get a cold. So you have to obviously just use your own discretion as to how much, exposure you want other people to have. But there's some things you have to do. So I can't tell you have to do this or you have to do that. But just to keep good hygiene, to try to limit the amount of time you have with exposures to other people, and that'll help prevent the spread of any disease. Oh, sure.
So should I take vitamin C? Should I drink a lot of water? Shall I eat vegetables? Or can I just have candy and donuts, my favorite?
Well, I can tell you that unfortunately, there really isn't anything that has been shown to protect you or lower your risk in terms of diet or supplements, that have been shown to reduce your risk of contracting a viral respiratory illness. So we've studied vitamin C, we've studied balanced diets. Nothing really has been shown to actually reduce the risk of you contracting the disease, of any of these diseases, these respiratory diseases. By far, the most important thing is wash your hands. So.
But when I'm laying there sick with my flu, shall I have chicken soup?
Yeah.
Should I, what would be to help me get better?
Yeah. So again, unfortunately, with respiratory illnesses, there's not much that one can do to shorten the course of disease. If you have specifically influenza, there is an antiviral called Tamiflu that you can take that can shorten your course of symptoms by only 24 to 48 hours. So it reduces your illness from 10 days to 8 days. The chicken soup, there's actually some research on chicken soup that the salt content of the chicken soup actually helps to reduce some of the swelling in your throat. That makes people feel better, so that's not a bad thing. Staying well hydrated is always a good thing, because when you have fevers, you're coughing a lot, you can get dehydrated really easily. These don't shorten the course of symptoms that make you feel better. They're also over-the-counter medicines that you can take. So if you have a low-grade fever and you have body aches, taking medications like ibuprofen, which is Advil, or Motrin, acetaminophen, which is Tylenol, can be helpful. There are also over-the-counter decongestants and antihistamines that you can take as well. But those just help symptoms. They don't shorten the course. Yeah, there's a couple of questions here.
Great. Go 1, 2, and then 3 over there. Thank you. Sure.
Good afternoon. My name is Calvin Johnson.
Hi.
So my professor back there, shout out to Professor Ayotte. So my girlfriend came back from Italy. Her study abroad program actually got canceled. So if she starts expressing symptoms of the coronavirus, should I, 1, get her quarantined, 2, should I break up with her, or or 3, should I test my luck? What do you think?
I think the answer is
I do have a girlfriend, Professor. What do you mean?
So first of all, where in Italy was she?
I actually don't know.
Okay.
I actually don't know. I have no idea. She's real. What do you? Wow, you're breaking my heart. Thank you.
All right. So the answer is, well, this supposed girlfriend of yours, no, you should not break up with her. But in terms of quarantine, that's a very difficult question. So, from right now, because the major epicenter of the disease was in China, the quarantine has been limited to that country. At the moment right now, the CDC is not recommending the quarantine of anyone from outside of China. That said, these guidelines are changing every single day. So what I would say is if this girlfriend
She has, she has a name. Brittany.
oh, okay.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
is coming from Italy. I think the question to ask is right now what we're seeing is specifically cases from Milan, and that which is in northern Italy, from what's called the Lombardy region. And so if they're coming from there and they develop respiratory symptoms, they probably should, in my opinion, reach out to a medical provider for further guidance and testing. From other parts of the country, we're not seeing as many cases. So she was in Rome or in Naples, it's more southern Italy, then you wouldn't see as much of that. But in terms of quarantine, what I tell people right now is if you come back from a country where there are reported cases of coronavirus, you should be a little bit careful, and just monitor yourself. So for instance, I just came back from Taiwan, where there are 32 cases of coronavirus reported. There have been no community cases reported. So what I'm doing right now is I'm asymptomatic. I'm not quarantining myself, as you can imagine. But obviously, I'm just kind of kind of monitoring my symptoms. I've been washing my hands like crazy just to make sure, again, if anything were to happen, I would limit the spread of anything like that. I think that's reasonable because, again, the chance, even if you travel to Italy, the chances that you were the one that picked that virus up and brought it back is still really low, So you don't need to completely change your lifestyle based upon it, just to be a little vigilant right now. For sure. Yeah.
Thank you. Is it cool if I shake your hand or no?
Probably not right now.
There was one question over here. Yes.
So the coronavirus, back to, I guess, want to add in part to what she was saying. You were saying that it attacks the immunity, your immune system, and it's harder for, I guess, seniors and those who have HIV, cancer, that type of thing. I'm a big proponent of alternative medicine, and the last thing I read was that the flu shot was 40% effective, correct, for this time around, so there's a 60% chance you'll still get it. And my understanding that there's for alternative medicine, clove oil was a big thing, and it has compounds that help increase your immune system. It increases your white blood cell, therefore reducing hypersensitivity. So if you strengthen your immune system, are the chances of obtaining it reduced?
That's a very good question. What's interesting about this virus, and I'll try to answer this in a way that it's a little bit complicated. So, what's interesting when you contract a viral illness is you actually if it's going to cause serious disease, it causes serious disease in one of two ways. Either someone has a very weak immune system, and so they can't fight the virus off, and so the virus just multiplies in your body and gets out of control, and then it kills you, right? That's one way you go. What's interesting is when you study deaths from viral illnesses, from respiratory illnesses, ironically, you see a big spike in deaths in people who are older, who have weakened immune systems, things like that. But you also see sometimes you see a little spike in people in their 20s, 30s, and early 40s. And they're why is that, right? And what's interesting is that if you have too strong an immune system, that can also be a bad thing. Because what happens is you don't die from the virus attacking you, but you die because your immune response is too aggressive. And you actually, it's the immune system that actually kills you. Not to scare, because you guys all look pretty young. It's a slight rise. And so I think that the data on using things to boost the immune system have not shown benefit in terms of reducing your risk of contracting these viruses or reducing the severity of the illness that we can see right now. Now, again, a lot of research has to be done, that we need to study this a little bit more. It's an emerging disease. But from our experience from prior, this is specifically to upper respiratory illnesses, that things that have been done to try to boost the immune system don't necessarily help, and potentially, at least theoretically, could make things worse. So what I'm trying to say is that I think that just practicing good hygiene is really good. Now, you're talking about the flu vaccine. I want to address that too. You're absolutely right. So the flu vaccines are never 100% effective. And the reason they aren't is because flu vaccine takes about 3 to 6 months to make, right? And what has to happen is that the flu virus, influenza virus, is constantly mutating. And what happens is that the North American folks look and see what's circulating in the southern hemisphere because their winter is our summer, right? And so they start to get waves of influenza coming through, and we have to predict, okay, well, which one of these is going to jump ship over to North America in 4 to 6 months? So we do a guess, and we pick 3 strains every year, and we make a vaccine out of it. Unfortunately, the guesses are never fully accurate because we can't actually tell which ones are going to jump over. And so that's why our efficacy rates are quoted in the 40% range. I want to stress, though, that 40% protection does not mean that you have a 60% chance of getting influenza. It means that if you were to come into contact with influenza, you would have a 40% reduction of getting disease, of getting the illness. However, there's a secondary efficacy of vaccines, which is very important, that even if you catch a strain that the vaccine is not protective against from you getting sick, it can oftentimes reduce the severity of your illness. So the severity of your flu is also less. So the reason you take a flu vaccine is not to prevent you completely from getting the flu. It's to reduce your chance of getting the flu by about 40%. But if you get the flu, your symptoms are also less severe. So that's why we advocate the use of the flu vaccine, at least in the medical community.
So it would seem for most, we would be fine. And recognizing the weak, the response to this virus has been seemingly especially strong. And I would think we may have had other viruses that were perhaps as threatening. What is it about this virus that people are shutting down schools, et cetera?
That's a really good question. So obviously there have been a ton of other viral outbreaks and new viruses that have emerged, and you can probably think of Ebola as an example, or you can think of HIV in the 1980s, or SARS emerged. The reason why this has particularly raised the alarm bells is that respiratory illnesses are the easiest illnesses to transmit. Right. So in general, like Ebola isn't transmitted through coughing. It's through direct physical contact. So I have to touch someone with Ebola to get Ebola, right? But you have to physically touch the person, right? But in respiratory diseases, I can cough a lot or sneeze a lot, and I can spray all of you right now, right? And I don't have to touch you, and I can give it to you, right? Or I can cough on this table and smear it all over and get a lot of people. So I think the reason why there's been so much anxiety, or at least so much vigilance, is the fact that respiratory illnesses can spread like wildfire. And because we still don't fully understand yet exactly how deadly this virus is, that's why we're a little bit concerned, because our experience with other coronaviruses like SARS and MERS showed that those diseases had very high mortality rates. So obviously this disease seems to have a lower one, but we still don't have the full information quite yet.
So my question is, so if someone's had a pneumonia vaccine, does that lessen the person's resistance to the coronavirus, or does it have any impact at all? And also I have a question regarding hearing yesterday on the news that it'll take at least a year before a vaccine is found for the coronavirus.
Those are good questions. So for those who have the pneumococcal vaccine, so that's a vaccine that's given to protect against certain strains of bacteria that cause pneumonia, typically given to people over the age of 65. We don't know the exact data on that, but likely it would not affect it wouldn't affect or alter the risk of getting coronavirus. So if you got the pneumococcal vaccine, I don't think that would affect or impact the ability for you to contract coronavirus in a positive or negative way. Now the second question I'm sorry, can you repeat your second question? Yeah. Oh, vaccine, right. That's right. So vaccine's a great question. So they are obviously working on a vaccine. It takes some time, obviously, to work on the science to develop the vaccine. So, it'll probably take at least 18 months. That is about the shortest time frame you have to develop a vaccine. I do want to tell you, though, that I don't want to hang my hat on a vaccine as a complete solution to the coronavirus, because coronavirus is very similar to influenza virus in that they're constantly mutating, and so the vaccine would likely have to be adjusted all the time. So it may be that if they can develop a vaccine that's effective against this coronavirus, then it might get lumped into like sort of a combination coronavirus flu vaccine. I could see that going in the future, but the way that coronavirus works, I think it'll be very similar to flu in that you'll have a partially effective vaccine as compared to other vaccines like measles or polio, which are 100% effective.
I have a question.
Hi.
Is it true that the coronavirus can threaten us one time, like once we develop antibody in our body, like then next time it won't pose threat to us?
That's a very good question. So typically with other coronaviruses, when you get a coronavirus infection, you are typically immune from that strain. That immunity does seem, unlike other illnesses, can wane over time. And so it is possible after a few years to get reinfected again. And there actually are some reports coming out of China that some people who have cleared the infection have retested positive again. So we actually don't know the answer as to whether or not you would develop immunity to this infection. So with typical coronaviruses, if you get that strain, you usually shouldn't get the strain again, although that immunity can wane. But there are some reports, I was just reading yesterday, that there are a couple of cases in China of people who got the infection, cleared it, like completely cleared their symptoms, but then retested positive later. So I think the jury is still out as to whether or not you actually get immunity after the infection.
So I have a question, actually. I'm going to get into a little bit of a harder topic, xenophobia. And I guess thoughts on, there's a lot of this has come out from China, and I've encountered people that have expressed fears around being around Chinese people, and just sort of your thoughts on, I guess, infectious diseases and xenophobia.
That's a great question, Perry. I think any time something arises that instills fear into people, it's an opportunity for people to act on that fear in both positive and negative ways. And I think obviously, unfortunately, one of the negative consequences of the fear of disease is to scapegoat populations. I always want to stress that viruses don't care what your skin color is. And viruses will affect all humans equally. And so this virus just happened to emerge out of a country, which was China, but the problem isn't the Chinese people. It's just happened to be where the virus came from. So similarly, with Ebola, there was a lot of discrimination against people from Africa. HIV was a lot of discrimination against gay people. And I think that we have to be very careful about how we approach this disease. I also want to stress the fact that Asian Americans and Chinese Americans, I haven't set foot in Wuhan in my entire life, right? And so just because I look like someone from Wuhan does not mean that somehow I inherently carry this virus, And so I think it's imperative that we all stand up to any types of discrimination that we see out there. There's a lot of reports of Chinese businesses, in particular in Chinatowns in the Bay Area, they're suffering from their business because people somehow feel that these people must have this virus, and I'm just, it's really sad to see. So if you're seeing any signs of this, please speak up. I think it's really important to stand up for your fellow human being here. So.
I have a couple quick questions. My first question was in regards to hand washing, and I came in a little late, apologies for that. But so if we were to use hand sanitizer, it says 99.9%. Obviously, the coronavirus just came out. Do we actually know whether the coronavirus is included in the 99.9% that's killed?
Yes. So let me just answer that question. I'll get to your. Yes. So coronavirus. So this coronavirus acts in a very similar way. Its genetics are very similar to other coronaviruses. So yes, hand sanitizer will be effective as long as you're using it correctly.
Okay.
Yep.
And recently I've been seeing a lot of people wearing or buying masks, so I wanted to clear up, maybe you were talking about earlier about some myths about like certain types of like, if you wanted to be really overprotective about it, what kinds of masks that you would wear. And my final question was, I wanted some more information about like the actual origin of the disease, because I've heard from social media, which is not a very accurate source, that supposedly like someone was selling some sort of like fish in the black market, and it was basically like one guy that messed it up for all of us. But I was just curious like where it came from. Like it didn't originate in humans, I believe. But
Right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So with the mask, just to reiterate again, I think that the only role of masks perhaps is that if you feel sick and you're coughing and sneezing and you have to go to class, wear a mask. Because that's the time where masks can protect you from spreading it to other people, you know? That goes hand in hand with hand hygiene. So when you wear a mask, you don't stop washing your hands, you know? But wearing a mask around just for willy-nilly really does very little to protect you, just to reiterate that. What type of mask you're alluding to is a simple surgical mask. The ones with the little elastic around your ear loops is all you really need. Some people have talked about these N95 masks. So the two problems with that is actually the filtering. The filter of the N95 mask goes down to 0.3 microns, but the virus is smaller than that. So it really doesn't much offer protection. And if you've ever worn an N95 mask, it is hard. Like after 5 minutes, you just want to pass out because it's hard to breathe through it. And as for the origins of the virus, so no one knows exactly, you know, coronaviruses exist in animals and humans, and it seemed like the initial cluster of cases emerged from an animal market, in a live animal market. And so, you know, common sources of coronavirus are from like bats have them, pigs have them. And so, you know, in Chinese culture, I can speak as a Chinese person, you know, there's a lot of consumption of exotic animals, a lot of times for medicinal purposes. And so you would say, oh, why would there be a bat in a live animal, you know, meat market? But there actually are. And so, but, you know, it could have been from a pig. It could, you know, no one knows. So there's a lot of research going on to that.
And speaking of origin, I'm going to ask another question. Perhaps this falls into the myth or fact category.
Yes.
Could it have been an engineered bioweapon?
Yeah, that's a
Some
great
people
question.
think that, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
so
social media, you know.
Yeah. So lots of conspiracy theories out there. So as some of you may have read, there apparently is a laboratory in Wuhan where there is viral research going on. So some people have said, oh, they're working on engineering a bioweapon, and then it accidentally leaked out, and now it's out of control. I guess theoretically it's possible, but there's no evidence to suggest that the virus emerged from there. And also, coronavirus itself is a very poor bioweapon. I mean, if you're gonna like develop something that's gonna well, I mean, I guess it's good as an economic bioweapon, I suppose, because it's caused enough panic to cause world markets to collapse. But here's the thing, that from a Chinese perspective, right? And I'm Econ 101 professor here, right? Like, why would you want to instill an worldwide economic panic? It doesn't help the Chinese economy, and China's like the major manufacturer for the world, so it makes no sense. And if you're going to design a virus, you probably want to design a virus that like strikes quickly, spreads quickly, kills everyone, right? And this is, yeah, it kind of spreads quickly, but it's killing like 1/10 of 1% of people. So like, what good does that do, right? And most people just get the sniffles. So it's hard for me to buy that as a plausible theory.
Other questions?
So if there are no questions, I just want to reiterate 3 points. Do you remember the 3 points you're supposed to take away from this today? One is, don't panic. Yes, don't panic. There's no reason to panic. Number 2 is, wash your hands. And number 3 is, get a flu shot. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cheng. Thanks, everyone, for coming here. One last thing I wanted to mention, and we talked about a lot of what we're hearing in social media. Be critical of the information that you're getting. I hear a lot of things like, there are miracle masks for sale on Facebook, and there are shields against infected girlfriends. Don't throw your money away. Be critical of the information you're getting. If you have any questions, talk to people that are knowledgeable, and look for websites from like the CDC website. But again, don't buy anything. Thanks. Thank you.